So you go on X or Instagram and you show a picture and you say, "Can you identify this person?" Is that basically
John Doe, ABC, did ABC, let's say,
right?
on so-and-so date. This is the location. NYPD, Stop Anti-Semitism, needs your help. Please reach out if you have recognized.
Fantastic.
And in less than 24 hours, a neighbor recognized him.
Mainstream media gives you the impression that there is nothing good about America. In direct contrast to that, my podcasts will prove by examples that America has always been and still is the land of opportunity for everyone.
Hello, and welcome to another episode in the series Life Lessons with Dr. Bob. My guest today is Leora Rez. Leora was born in Lithuania, which at that time was part of the Soviet Union. But thanks to the successful efforts of President Ronald Reagan to evacuate Jews from the Soviet Union, Leora's family was able to emigrate to the United States as political refugees when she was just 5 years old. Now, I usually provide more background on my guests, such as where they went to college and where they currently live, but as you'll soon learn, Leora's work puts her in some danger, so I won't give you any more details on her personal life. In a moment, we'll talk to her about her somewhat dangerous work, which is fighting anti-Semitism. But first, my personal opinion on the terms anti-Semitism and anti-Semites. I don't like those terms. We all know that anti means against, but very few people know the meaning of Semite, which I actually had to look up. A Semite is a member of any of the peoples who speak or spoke a Semitic language, including in particular the Jews and Arabs. So strictly speaking, an anti-Semite is a person who is against Jews and Arabs. But that's not what it's meant to mean, is it? The term is confusing. And in addition, it's too passive. Like antiperspirant, I'm against perspiration. Anti-Semitism doesn't convey the meaning of what it's supposed to convey, which is hatred of Jews. I prefer to use that term, or Jew hatred, rather than anti-Semitism, and I prefer the term Jew haters rather than anti-Semites. Jew hatred and Jew haters are both clear, accurate, and blunt. It's now time to talk with my guest, Leora Rez. Welcome to the show, Leora.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Now, 6 years ago, anti-Semitism in the U.S. was not at the high level that it is today. But having lived in the Soviet Union, you were very sensitive to anti-Semitism, and you were aware of the dangers of it increasing, as it has. So in 2018, you founded an organization to confront it, and you named it Stop Anti-Semitism. Regardless of the name, we are both in agreement that we want to stop Jew hatred. Tell me, was there a particular anti-Semitic event in 2018 that made you start your organization? What was the straw that broke the camel's back?
So that's actually a great question. I've been working in digital marketing and in the social media world since 2012. And as every year passed, I had noticed that there was so much anti-Semitic rhetoric, not only just coming from the alt-right and the neo-Nazi movement, but also from the radical left, from Black Hebrew Israelites, from the radical Islamic area. And when I had approached others regarding these ever increasing threats, I was always told that social media isn't real. It doesn't permeate into the real world. And if we take a look now in 2024, this couldn't be more further from the truth. Whatever starts on social media constantly bleeds into the real world. And I took these no's as a motivational factor. And in 2018, Stop Anti-Semitism was born.
Your organization's motto is holding anti-Semites accountable. So let's explore that. First, how do you learn about anti-Semitic incidents that are happening around our country?
So Stop Anti-Semitism has grown to be probably the most popular source for individuals, specifically 50 and under, to submit incidents of anti-Semitism to. That's for the sole reason that from day one, we have always utilized the power of social media. We've developed a following, I want to say, across all of our social media platforms of about 600,000 to 700,000 followers. And from that number, we then reach about 500 million people. So everything is organically submitted. Individuals contact us via our website, via our text and phone line that is monitored 24/7, via our social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. And it's essentially an aggregator. Essentially, our analysts aggregate all of these incidents and then decide what is and is not anti-Semitic. We utilize the IRA, which is the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. It's adopted by the U.S. Department of State. It's adopted by the U.S. Department of Education. And this is our gold standard for deeming what is and is not anti-Semitic. But essentially, we've developed such a strong following and strong reputation, and now almost the 6 years, that the American public is aware that when you come to us, you get an answer. First of all, if yay or nay, you can help. And then secondly, they see concrete, tangible results happening. Individuals are fired, individuals are suspended, we had an arrest and an assault crime charge in New York City last week after we identified an attacker of a rabbi in Chelsea. So people want to see tangible action, not just a report, fall in a black hole, never to be heard of again.
Good. And mainly you're focused on the United States, anti-Semitic incidents in the U.S.
Right now, because of limited manpower, and again, just 24 hours in a day, and the sheer volume of anti-Semitic incidents occurring, we just do not have the capabilities, or I don't foresee it in the near future, to be honest, for dealing with anything outside of the United States. We get asked daily for help in Canada, specifically. What's happening in Toronto and Montreal and Quebec is just horrifying. What's happening in Europe, we get requests for help there. In Australia, in Mexico, in South America, in Brazil, and Argentina, we get requests quite frequently. In South Africa, we're often requested with assistance, and we're just not able to, unfortunately.
No, I can understand that, and you should focus on one territory. Hopefully, the number of incidents will go down. But if they don't, perhaps you'll be able to raise enough money and expand to other countries. But that
maybe one day.
It becomes very complicated. Different languages and
different laws, different languages.
Too complicated. So you have so many incidents that are reported. Do you have a breakdown? Do you do a statistic? Maybe you don't need to, but it would be interesting to know where they are occurring, what cities or what states. So you could, and also, is there a breakdown on the type of people? Are they black, white, or Hispanic? Are they Muslim or Christians? It'd be interesting, but I don't know if you have time to do that kind of analysis.
So I have to tell you, the incidents are coming from absolutely every part of America. Clearly, just because of population statistics, obviously larger cities, LA, New York City, Chicago, those, are more frequent in numbers, but we are seeing them from every area of the United States. What is even more, I don't know if it's shocking or frightening. Since October 7th, we've had hundreds and hundreds of individuals that we've successfully created, again, those tangible results that I was speaking about. And when we look at them, again, we have their photos, we have their names, we have backgrounds on them. They have nothing in common. All races, all religions, both sexes, they have absolutely nothing in common, from hairdressers to surgeons. The only common denominator that they have is their hatred of Jews.
Now, how do you follow up on the reports that are submitted to make sure that they're accurate?
So there's various due diligence factors that take place. There's employment verifications. There's, partnering with the social media platforms, ensuring that this individual's profile indeed belongs to them. There's behavioral analysis, so on and so forth. But we do everything possible to ensure that our vetting processes are 100% positive and intact. The last thing we would ever want to do is ruin an innocent person's reputation or livelihood.
And how do you cull them down from the hundreds that you get perhaps every week? How many do you get? How many reports?
At our heyday, we were receiving 500 to 700. This is shortly after October 7th. In one day. Yes. We are still operating on a near 3-month backlog of getting individuals, actual anti-Semites, properly vetted, all of their profiles. We have to do the proper due diligence for legal reasons. We are still operating on a 3-month backlog. And my team and I, we're not working standard 8-9 hour days. And we still cannot catch up. We thought we're 8 months past October 7th, that we would see
a slowdown.
There's no slope. The slope continues to increase. It's shocking. It's frightening. We saw another rise with the college protests. Now we see with the mob riots in New York City and in various other parts of the country. And these incidents just keep rolling in. These anti-Semitic individuals just keep rolling in. We simply cannot keep up. It's quite shocking. And that this is happening in America 2024.
And you cull them down. You make sure probably 80% of them are probably correct and actionable. But how do you decide which ones to publish?
So our most concerning ones are what physical danger could result from this individual, right? For instance, last week when I had just spoken about, there was an individual who had attacked a rabbi in Chelsea. And the New York Post has, covered it. They needed help identifying the individual. So with our technology, we weren't able to identify the individual as well, just because of a lot of, grainy photos, things like that, and lower resolution footage. However, when we took this individual's face and coverage of the incident to the public and crowdsourced it, because of our massive reach, there was a neighbor of this man who helped identify him.
Fantastic.
We brought this information to the New York, to the NYPD, to New York police, and he was shortly arrested, and he was charged with assault, but also with a hate crime on top of that, which in New York City, that is not an easy feat. So we were just, so proud that we did our part in taking this rabid anti-Semite off the streets, and hopefully he is punished to the fullest extent of the law.
Now, so do you have a place on your website for pictures, and you say, can you help us identify this person?
Yeah.
Or how did that happen?
So our most popular platform and our most visited platform, we're reaching over 400 million people a month on our Twitter X, formerly known as Twitter now. Our Instagram platform is extremely popular for those 45 and under. We reach anywhere from 2 to 20 million, depending on frequencies, or a specific month. But whenever we need something, something that's very urgent to identify, we splash everywhere, but primarily social media.
I see. So let me make sure I understand. So you go on X or Instagram and you show a picture and you say, can you identify this person? Is that based?
John Doe did this. John Doe, ABC, did ABC, let's say,
right,
on so-and-so date. This is the location. NYPD, Stop Anti-Semitism, needs your help. Please reach out if you have recognized.
Fantastic.
And in less than 24 hours, a neighbor recognized him.
Great work. Great
Talk
job.
about the power of social media.
Of the hundreds of Jew haters, how do you decide which ones to feature on your website? Do you feature all of them, or the ones that are most likely to commit a crime?
Definitely the most likely to harm Jews physically. This is why you see such a large number of physicians, surgeons, dentists, pediatricians, pediatric specialists, nurses, anyone that is in the medical field that has a patient in their office and their chair, specifically children, specifically the elderly, that whether subconsciously or consciously could do harm to a Jew.
Ooh. So there are professionals. These are not just hooligans.
The majority of the people that we've seen and encountered since October 7th are extremely educated, extremely talented, have put in a lot of time, money, and effort into their education, into their thriving careers, and have completely thrown it down the toilet thanks to their Jew hatred.
Now, the most important question is your organization's mission, which is to hold anti-Semites accountable. So how do you do that? Do you just expose them online, or do you do more? For example, do you report them? In that case, you did report it to the police. And do you report them to their employers or their professors? How do you hold them accountable in addition to posting about them?
So we have a direct methodology. We never post anybody just as an FYI. There's a direct, tangible result from our actions. We list their employers. We make sure that the public has a way to contact their employers. We often tag their employers in social media posts. And then subsequently, they receive communication on my behalf and from Stop Anti-Semitism's behalf, citing what their employee has done. So there's definitely a tangible methodology behind it in order for us to get results. In the medical field, for every medical professional that we have featured, we have about a 75% success rate, if you want to call it that, in getting an individual not only just investigated, but fired from their position. The hospitals, these practices just don't want the liability factor, and no one can blame them. When you have a pediatric gastroenterologist dealing with a 2-year-old Orthodox little Jewish boy while he's going home at night and spewing rape denialism and atrocity denialism from the October 7th massacre, while spewing his hatred against the Jewish people, while putting his hands on Jewish patients the next morning, that's atrocious. And hospitals just don't want that liability.
So can you give us some specific successes like that one?
The website lists in summary. It does not list names.
And I think why she's hesitant, by the way, not because there aren't success stories of getting these people held accountable, or I use the term punished. It's just that there's a litigious society, and these websites like this podcast is broadcast. Anybody can see it, and naming names and it's a strange world, can get Leora and her organization in trouble. But from my private conversations with her, you can be assured that people have been fired, named people that they identified as haters, as Jew haters, and as dangerous Jew haters, have been fired from their job or have lost employment opportunities. I don't know if any have been thrown out of school yet. Schools you can't depend on to do the right thing. But she is doing a great job in that regard.
Oh, thank you. No, we have had some students expelled, expelled. Yeah, I will say, though, that it is the smaller, less known schools. Although when it is egregious enough, we helped identify one of the Harvard students who back in November of 2023 was partaking in that harassment physical campaign against a Harvard Jewish student. So we helped identify him, and the school actually threw him out of housing. They wouldn't provide any more details. However, the local police did file charges against him. And again, we're not sure, we're not getting much information as what's happening. But besides that particular case, there definitely are smaller, less known schools that are just refusing to put up with this. We actually had a lawsuit last year or the year before, I believe. A professor in Philadelphia was fired due to his egregious anti-Semitism, and he had the audacity to sue the university and to sue Stop Anti-Semitism. And he was citing libel and defamation. And again, we're doing nothing but regurgitating his own words. And he broke an ethics and employment clause in his university agreement, his employment agreement. And he sued both us and the university, and he lost. However, it costs a pretty penny, as you can imagine. So we try to avoid these kind of situations whenever we can.
Have you seen many incidents at the Ivy class schools, which are turning into real swamps for learning?
Have we seen any action from them?
No, other than the one you mentioned, the Harvard, that's a great story. How about Columbia or Yale?
Honestly, barely anything. They're doing nothing at this point besides greenlighting more and more Jew hatred. It's honestly mind-boggling to me. When we look at Penn, okay, Liz McGill finally stepped down. She kept some other cushy position at the school. You have a professor there, Ann Norton, who should be working for the Hezbollah spokes office rather than, teaching at Penn. Which is what, $75,000 a year now. Jewish students are going to, the board, going to the interim president. We don't feel safe, so on and so forth. Nothing. They're doing nothing. We featured this woman. She's just an embarrassment. She's a Jew hater. She's an embarrassment. They will not do anything about her. It's insane. And she's just a small example. When we look at the UC schools, we looked at Cal State. We had a professor out there we've been featuring since 2020, 2021. He was making fun, mocking one of the hostages that was just released in this past Saturday. This is a woman 8 months held by Hamas terrorists. 8 months while her mother at home was dying of breast cancer. God knows what happened to her. I don't even want to think about it. But he had the audacity to mock her on social media, on top of the multiple pro-Hamas statements he's made. Back in 2020, he said that Israel was keeping the good vaccine, the COVID vaccine, for the Jews, giving the Arabs something else. Just a complete anti-Semitic lunatic. The school won't do anything about him. It continues to poison young minds. So these are just tiny examples. These liberal art universities that have turned into these ultra left jihadi training camps, it seems, Marxist training camps for these kids who just want to belong to something, and they leech onto these movements, and it really affects the majority of kids who are there just to learn, spending a fortune, going into debt for all of this, and it's affecting the staff that is there, again, to work, make a paycheck, and teach as they're supposed to do, but the majority cannot because of this small, poisonous minority.
I believe there's a connection between anti-Semitism and being woke and anti-Americanism. Do you believe that's the case too?
So it very quickly turned from anti-Jewish to anti-American, right? It very quickly, death to Israel, to now it's death to America. Israel is America's little cousin. Again, I'm from the former Soviet Union, so whatever somebody does in their home is none of my business. I don't care. If you want to be woke, if you want to be conservative, if you want to be moderate, that's fine, as long as you don't infringe on my and my family's rights and abilities. We've now gotten to a point where these Marxist, ultra, I don't even know what to call them. It just doesn't make sense.
They're anarchists.
Yes, Marxist anarchists looking to do nothing but create chaos, to destroy the equilibrium on college campuses. Again, I cannot stress this enough. College should be the best 4 years of your life. It really should. And in 2024, An Ivy League education costs between $300,000 and $400,000 for 4 years. These students, if they're lucky enough to have parents or families help pay, wonderful. But the majority of these students are going to such massive debt, and they can't even study without hearing "Globalize the Intifada" outside the library during midterms and finals. And the administration does nothing. So I'm getting to a point where I have to ask myself, what family is going to finally say enough is enough? I want a refund on last semester's or last 2 semesters because my kid couldn't study because you couldn't control
Didn't get value for the money. Didn't get what you were promised.
No, I would ask for a refund. Absolutely. 50 grand for a semester where, a kid is in the science library studying for the MCATs and they're hearing "Free Palestine. We don't want no 2-state. We want 48." A quarter of a mile down, they're so loud. They're being intimidated. They're being assaulted verbally and physically. Meanwhile, you're paying an arm and a leg for this. You're paying for others to make your lives a living hell, while those who are there to protect you are doing nothing.
I know this is not your expertise, but what are your feelings about where does the funding come from? These things they pop up overnight, so they're clearly arranged and they're clearly financed. And matter of fact, I don't know what the percent is, but 30 or 40% of the people who were involved in these protests, the sit-ins or the sleep-ins on campus, were not students at all, and they were paid to be there. So, do you have 100%. Any insight into the funding?
100%. It's honestly astounding how quickly they organized, huh? So the same Occupy Wall Street,
same thing,
lunatics, the same George Floyd lunatics are now have metastasized into Free Palestine anarchists. And we see the same funders. We have the Rockefeller Foundation, we have the Tides Foundation, we have the Open Society. And again, who are they funding? They're funding American Muslims for Palestine, AMP. They're funding
SJP.
Students in Palestine, SJP, who are solely responsible for these. They're not protests, they're mob riots on college campuses that are really affecting, again, 18 to 22-year-olds who are paying an enormous amount of money to be there to study and have fun. And they're doing nothing but creating chaos. And again, yes, there are outside agitators between 30 and 50%, depending on certain college campuses. But it's astounding that this is still allowed to happen, right? I mean, a few days ago, it was still happening. There was another encampment at UCLA.
Right.
There was an encampment at Columbia Alumni Weekend. I believe it was two weekends ago. Then you look at states like, Ohio, Indiana. You look at Florida, where you have University of Florida President Ben Sass. He's like, we're not, this isn't a daycare. You do this, you're going to get suspended, arrested, and barred from campus for 3 years. Students are here to learn and to have fun and enjoy their life for 4 years. They're not here, to call for the death of others, and certainly not here to call for the death of America. You have Ohio State University, who from day one said, no, not on our campus. And they had snipers on buildings. And they immediately dispersed the garbage that was, happening. You had Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio, which they had protesters. They wouldn't leave. So after they graffitied Free Palestine onto the walls, guess what their painters did? They painted right over the individual standing there.
I read about that.
It was phenomenal. That's exactly what you do.
That's what we have to do.
If they have no respect for rules, you have no respect for them.
Thank you, Leora, for speaking with me today. And thank you so much more for the very important and difficult work that you are doing fighting Jew hatred in our country by punishing Jew haters. Because of the large increase in anti-Semitic activities around our country, there's been a lot of discussion about how to combat it. And the usual suggestion is more education or better education. But education is not a solution to eliminating or even in reducing anti-Semitism. You can teach people about the Holocaust or about the recent barbarous attacks on Jews by Hamas in Israel on October 7th, 2023. But regardless of education, people who hate Jews will continue to hate Jews. It only took one day after the massacre on October 7th for the airways and social media to be filled with glorification of Hamas's atrocities. Education is not going to fix hatred. Anti-Semitism has been with us since Abraham, the first Jew who walked the earth over 3,000 years ago. It's not going to go away. But that doesn't mean that it has to be passively accepted. If Jews were more willing and ready to fight back, either through the courts or even in the streets, then those Jew haters would be much more careful in acting out on their hatred. Let me give you a simple example. If a white racist walked through Harlem with a sign saying, "Blacks back to Africa," even without using the N-word, what would happen to him? What would happen to him is that he wouldn't get out of that neighborhood in the same healthy condition that he entered it. He might even be killed. And that's why you don't see racist skinheads or Nazi sympathizers holding rallies in black neighborhoods. But what happens when Jews in the Bronx walk to temple wearing a yarmulke, a head covering? They get attacked. That's what happens to him. What usually happens to his attacker? Nothing. The attacker runs off and is rarely caught. Maybe an article will be printed the next day in the New York Times condemning the anti-Semitic attack. But the article will also contain a warning to Jews to not be so obviously Jewish outside of their homes. I don't believe you can fight anti-Semitism with education or with any other passive means, because anti-Semitism is a philosophy, and you can't fight a philosophy. But you can fight anti-Semites. You can call them out, publicize what they stand for, describe their heinous actions, and then hold them accountable for those actions. The only way to fight Jew hatred is to punish Jew haters. And that's exactly what Leora's organization does. And if you'd like to join her in this fight, then go to Leora's website, stopantisemitism.org, all one word, and sign up to volunteer. And while you're there, make a tax-deductible donation too. I did. Well, thank you for watching. And if you enjoyed this episode of Life Lessons with Dr. Bob, please subscribe, and you'll be automatically notified of future podcasts in this series.
Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Life Lessons with Dr. Bob. If you enjoyed these interviews with some of today's most influential thought leaders, please follow and rate the show on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget, you can also watch each episode on YouTube as well. We'll see you next time.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate reading your comments on YouTube and social media, and now you can submit your questions on my website as well. Head over to lifelessonswithdrbob.com and click the question tab at the top of the page or the one on the right side of the screen, and let us know what's on your mind. I'll answer your questions at the beginning of each episode, so let it rip. Let's have some fun.